Hello. So,
Hey,
Kima?
hi, yeah, is this any better? I've switched phones.
Yeah, this seems better. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, you just have to be in a good Wi-Fi environment.
Okay, yeah, I think this is better. Like my whole phone stopped working, so I've just literally stolen my husband's phone and we should be good to go now.
Okay, cool. So let me do a little brief introduction. After I do the brief introduction, then we'll go right into the interview questions.
Okay, awesome, sounds good.
So this is Fam Electric Ghost. I interview indie artists from around the world, and we have Kima Otung on the line, and we're going to talk to her about her music career. So I'm very happy to have you on the line.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
That's cool. So we ask the questions that we send you. So the first one we always ask is, when did you first get into music and at what age?
Yeah, so I can't even remember. I've been doing music for like as long as I can remember. Probably like 5 years old. I remember me and my sisters making these really cringe videos, and making up songs. We had a little kind of raggedy keyboard back then, and we'll just, put the demo on the keyboard and just make up all these songs to all of the demo tracks that were on it. So I hope no one ever digs up those videos, but that was when it kind of started. Music was always in my house, so it must have been around 5 years old.
Oh, that's interesting because I talked to a lot of artists and they do start young. I think that you're the youngest person. That's the youngest age. I usually hear like 7, 8. 5 is that's interesting. But that yeah, it's not unusual. A lot of singer songwriters, it's kind of in their blood. It
Yeah.
seems like it's part of their DNA.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I think that's definitely the case. I think like as you get older, people kind of then try and convince you to like be realistic, and like music's not a realistic choice. So I kind of went away from that thing that was in my DNA, that was in my blood, but I feel like I finally got back to it now. So that's really good.
Because you're an attorney, you're an AI attorney, right?
Yeah, I'm a lawyer, so, which is like wild. I don't know if you could have two worlds that are so opposing. But yeah, I've been balancing law and music for a while, but more recently I'm starting to do music, focus on music a lot more. Luckily with law, I can kind of pick it up and like put it down as and when. But yeah, I have been balancing the two for a little bit.
That's a good day gig because most musicians, they're doing starving artists, movers, or they're Uber drivers, or because I'm a IT professional myself, my day job. So
Amazing.
so being a electronic musician, then I can afford my Moogs and my Rollins.
That's is really true. Yeah, I think with law it has its pros and cons, because I guess the pros are that you can fund music from law, but then the cons are that law takes up so much of your time,
Yeah,
intellectual energy. By the time you're done with it, you're just exhausted. And music actually takes a lot of your emotional energy to create. So it does have its pros and cons,
yeah. I
definitely.
think it's interesting because a lot of musicians, like, they'll do everything they can to keep doing what they love to do, and then the world, like you said,
Yeah.
tries to say, "Oh, you have to be practical, you have to be realistic." How are you gonna, pay your obligations being an artist?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And what I'm learning, the more I learn about the music industry and how the opportunities out there, I'm learning that that's complete. It's nonsense. Like it's if you want to make it happen and you work really hard, there are a lot of avenues to make really good money from music. And I almost feel like I was done a disservice like growing up, because no one told me as a creative you can make
Yeah.
money. But I guess the average person just doesn't realize
Yeah, with
that.
the music, it's interesting. Music has become devalued in some ways ever since Napster
Yeah.
and the advent of streaming. See, one of the questions, I've
Hmm.
jumped to a question, but one of the things that happens, like in the industry, I grew up, I'm in my 50s, and
Hmm.
I used to play when I was 17, 18 in the basement with a bunch of bands in the garage and stuff. And back then, you couldn't get on like Spotify, you had to play at a bar. You had to be like a cover
Yeah,
band,
yeah,
and maybe you could play your own songs here and there, but you have to try to find some indie label to put your tape out. And it was very, very difficult to get any kind of traction except maybe on a college radio station. And so the
oh
cool thing
wow.
today is, but now you have so many bands they can get out there on the net, but
Mm.
then music has become devalued. I grew up, I went and bought Purple Rain on vinyl when it came out,
Wow.
the
Yeah.
day it came out.
Yeah.
But now people can just go on, a streaming service and, buy, they're not even buying the full price. It's like they're paying $10 a month or something.
It's so true. It's such a shame. I think, oh, like you said, on one hand, these amazing opportunities have been presented. I'm so inspired by the story of Lil Nas X, this rapper,
Yeah.
the one who did Old Town Road, and how he intentionally like made himself go viral on the internet using social media, using memes, and was basically able to circumvent this big kind of opaque music industry that normally you have to kind of network your way through and like hope someone will give you a chance. So there are those amazing opportunities, but then also in terms of revenue, making money, artists have to be a lot more creative these days with like brand deals and brand sponsorships and selling merchandise and all of these other avenues rather than just the streaming itself.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. It's like a lot of what, happens today. This podcast came out of the fact that I was on SoundCloud and somebody found me.
Wow.
And then they interviewed me on an old platform that went out, that failed. And then I came over to this platform and suddenly I've been able to have more traction as a podcaster than my music. But my music kicks off from here to there. I just got a record deal. I released an album on Friday.
That's incredible. Congrats.
So, I mean,
Wow.
I've got 2 labels doing distribution for me.
Yeah, that's
But
so
you kind of
cool.
like, that's the independent artist thing in me is like, oh, I can have this EP distributed by one label and this single distributed by another label. And you kind of,
Yeah,
and then I do this
exactly.
podcast on Spotify and Anchor. And then like, that's how you can get into influence marketing, like you said. And it's interesting because you have this dual career, but a lot of musicians have to now, get into this dual capability of being a pitch person, being an influencer and
Yeah.
getting there. And you've got a really good story in that your music was actually on TV. You're on ITV's Love Island. You've been on
Yeah.
BBC Radio 1 for the live session. So you've been able to convert into really good areas, as we did.
Yeah, I think with that, so like I've just been, so my first single I released last year, so it hasn't been very long. So I've with being on Love Island, I think one of the focuses was, okay, how am I actually going to make this music thing like a viable thing that you can actually live from and be very successful at? And like we were talking about before, the ways you can make revenue, licensing your music to kind of
Yeah.
TV, advertising, and films is a great way to make money for musicians. So I was like, how do I test this? I have no idea how to actually get onto TV. So it was for Love Island. I was like, okay, I'm going to test it with Love Island because I think this song would be perfect. And I'm a huge fan of the show. I would watch it all the time. So I was like, if I can test and try and get my song onto Love Island, find out the process, then I will kind of rinse, repeat with other kind of films and TV, and maybe make that part of my music, part of what I do.
Did you take your ability as a lawyer to kind of really be able to boost that, or was that a different skill set?
That is such an interesting question. I think I did, and I think that is while I've sometimes at points been like, oh, I should have just done music from the outset, gone to uni and studied music, and then like gone into a music career. I've learned so much from being a lawyer that I think gives me an advantage in the music industry, in that a lot of the skills you have to employ in terms of getting your music out there, getting people to take you seriously, has come from being a lawyer. So with getting on Love Island, I must have sent like 1,000 emails, just that polite persistence and crafting those emails and the wording of like what will really grab their attention, what's the story behind it, that's really gonna make them realize that this is a good fit, doing my research on the show, on who the producers are, who the music supervisors are, who I need to know, doing all of that skill set really came from law. And I think actually, in a way that I'm not happy about, being a lawyer helps in that I remember this, I wanted to have a phone call with this someone who was really influential in the music industry. And I sent him a message and he didn't reply. So a week later, I just followed up with a really polite, hey, don't know if you see my message. And the person thought I was being really rude and pushy. But then when they found out that I was a lawyer, all of a sudden they were like, oh, I didn't know you were a solicitor, as if I somehow became an actual human being because I had what they considered a real job. And then they gave me their time and then they had a call with me. So I was like, oh my gosh, when they thought I was just, I guess to them, some struggling musician, so, you know, some wannabe musician, they didn't even see me as human. But I guess once they found out I was a lawyer, they actually took me seriously. So there are elements of being a lawyer that really helps with music, and I definitely dig into that a lot.
Was it the track Morning that was on Love Island, or was it a different track?
It was Morning. So Morning's my first release, and I've just released another single. So I've only got 2 bits of music out there right at the moment, but there's so much more. I've written so much, and so I'll be coming out with another single towards the end of the year, and then an EP in the new year.
So let me get into like your new track, If Nobody Told You, but maybe back up to Morning. So when you were able to use your skills as a lawyer to kind of be your own agent, you know, your own manager, and be able to do what managers and agents are supposed to do, you were actually able to do.
Yeah.
Because that's what, you know, if musicians tend to be like, I'm not really good at business, I don't know that skill set, I'm a pure musician, I don't really know that. So they kind of defer to their managers. But then if we get to the actual crafting of the song Morning, how did you build the demo or build the song? You know, how did you pitch it? Did you pitch the full song or a demo version of the song and then get it produced? How did that go?
So with my track Morning, I kind of wrote the song, went to a producer who I'd found just like through friends, and recorded the whole thing. The song wasn't recorded with like sync licensing in mind. I think with TV licensing, it's good to bear in mind that they really like commercial songs that are like commercially successful, rather than songs that are created with an intention of like, I want this to be used in a TV program or in a show, because sometimes it doesn't feel authentic. So the song was just created just to be a single. But then because I was a big fan of Love Island, I was like, oh my gosh, this song would actually be perfect. And thinking about the kind of scenes that would be perfect in. When I pitched it to Love Island, I pitched a specific part of the song that I was like, this bit of the song would be perfect for this scene in the structure of how Love Island is done. That would work really well together. But I when I was recording and kind of writing the song, I definitely wasn't thinking of Love Island and TV licensing at that time.
So was it like a 30-second snippet or a 45-second snippet?
Yeah, it was the whole song, but you know, with sound, I send private links from SoundCloud, and you can click on the bit that you want it to start at. So you can make that be the link, and so when they click on the link, it starts at the bit of the song that you want to show them. So I always make it start at the bit that I think is most relevant, that will capture their interest. Yeah, whichever bit that I think is most relevant for whatever I'm pitching to.
That's cool. I've been a SoundCloud artist for a long time. It's been a pretty cool platform. Is kind of where I started, you know, why I'm here. There's a lot of people, you know, thought that platform was going away, but it's been able to survive, you know, its critics.
Yeah, exactly. It's still thriving.
Yeah, it's interesting. So when you did your demo, do you have like your own home studio? Do you use like Ableton or Pro Tools? Do you use a DAW, to like a digital audio workstation, to put your songs together, or do you work directly with a producer to do that, or do you have like demos that you bring to a producer?
Yeah, so I do a mix. So I have my own home studio now. I think lockdown made it imperative. The first song I did, I went to this producer's studio. I'd already written the song, already recorded like a demo version for him, then went to the studio and kind of put together like what it would sound like, and the kind of the meat on the bones. But now since lockdown, I've had to record music from my own home. So I've kind of kitted out the home studio, nothing fancy, literally the microphone that everyone has, the SM7B, I think it is, Shure microphone that apparently was Michael Jackson's favorite. I love it. It's really affordable and it does the job really well. So now, the new single was recorded from my bedroom, which I was really worried about. I just thought I'm not going to be able to get good enough quality from my room, but it's decent. Like it's been good enough. I have the kind of microphone, the sound shield
Yeah,
that
yeah,
makes the kind of lessens the background noise, the kind of the staples that you really need. And I've been working virtually with now a new producer for this song. He's based in Birmingham. I'm in London, so that's like, if I was to travel there, that would be like 4 hours. So we've literally been working virtually. I'll send him something, he'll send something back. I'll make comments, make some tweaks. I use Logic Pro, so I can make some tweaks on there, or send a concept of what I want it to sound like, and they just make it sound professional. Because I'm not a pro at Logic Pro. So I can put stuff together, put instruments in there, but in terms of the mastering and the
yeah.
mixing, that's
You
when
think
I
it's our
leave it.
producers
That's
and
when I
our
leave it to the
recording
producer.
engineers. But
Yeah.
in terms of like when you're using Logic, do you use a MIDI keyboard? Do you integrate other things into it, or do you just do it all on the grid?
Yeah, so I use a MIDI keyboard for basically everything. My husband's a
Okay.
drummer, so we have an electric drum kit. So sometimes he plays drums into the songs as well. Um, but I have like a tiny MIDI keyboard that's amazing, because I basically want to get to a point where I can record music from anywhere in the world and just be able to fit all my equipment to make quality songs into a suitcase. So I have this tiny MIDI keyboard that I can take anywhere with me. I also have, an upright
That's good.
piano in the living room, and then two bigger keyboards. I need to get rid of one of them because I don't use all of them. But the one I mainly use is the kind of really small one, because it's just so versatile in terms of what you can do with it. And I can go on holiday, pack it with me, pack my microphone, and record when I'm abroad, and still be able to be making music from anywhere in the world, which I'm really passionate about, which I really
Yeah, it's
love.
interesting today what you can do. I'm kind of a different story. Like an analog synthesis, so I've got these big Moogs and Roland hardware synths.
Oh,
So I'm kind of
interesting.
old school.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm like my heroes are like Stevie Wonder and guys like
Mm,
Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and Yes, and Genesis. So if you imagine those bands, they had these big stacks of synths. That's kind of the
yeah.
way I record.
That I feel like that's where you get the most authentic, beautiful sound. I think it's worth the extra
Yeah, it's
effort.
just kind of, I grew up being, in the new wave. I was like 17 when like Bowie was
Mm,
doing his stuff with Brian Eno and, Duran Duran and Joy Division and The Cure, and all these bands were coming up, and they were using all these hardware synths. And I was like, I'd go to pawn shops and go find Moogs
mm,
and find
wow.
like our 2600s. And then I just started building up a collection of these and learning how to play them and program them. And I just got really into synthesis from that kind of perspective, because if you think about
Yeah.
it, like, it can be used, keyboards can be used to create everything. The reason you're using a MIDI keyboard is, as a producer, if you can use a keyboard, you can write the whole song, you know. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of like the
Yeah.
idea I had back in the late 80s. Like, oh, if you use these synthesizers, you can just be a one-man band. Because I had all these punk bands and garage bands, and then people stopped wanting to come because they got married and they did whatever and they weren't into it. So I
Oh,
just kept on saying, well, if I'm like Prince, I could be a one-man band and just keep on writing forever.
mm,
It doesn't
yeah,
matter.
exactly. And now you've got record deals. So, I mean, that's
Yeah,
amazing.
it's like you got to be passionate about what you love. It's like I just kept on doing what I
Mm,
do, and it's kind of science
mm,
fiction, kind of space synthesis, but like Sun Ra or something. It's really kind of out there, but there's a market for everything. So if you get
yeah,
people that are into that, you find out where they are, you pitch to them, and then it's
100%.
like, so it depends on where you
And
want to be. But it's interesting that you're able to get to the kind of tier that a lot of pop stars want to get to. You were starting out the bat. You're there. That's really really cool. And I was reading about your background, is that you had like some classical background in like Welsh National Youth Opera, and I do hear in your latest single, I
yeah.
do hear that kind of classical sound. So maybe you can talk about on your new single how that's kind of incorporated. Like, if nobody told you, you've got these nice strings and this kind of sound is interesting.
Yeah.
It's kind of
Yeah, Exactly. So yeah, when I was 14, I auditioned. I don't sing opera, but I auditioned for the National Youth Opera because my vocal coach at the time was like, "Oh, you should go for it." And to my surprise, I actually got in, and I was like, "Oh my!" It was the most mind-blowing experience of my life. Like the amount of talent in that room, and I was the youngest one there. Everyone else was like in their 20s. So I was just in awe, and the music director is named Tim Reese-Evans, and he's the director of some of the most prolific and incredible choirs in the UK, and I just learned so much. I was like a sponge. So I think that's really stuck with me. I love the convergence of that classical background with the more kind of soulful and R&B sounds that I have, and putting them together. And I think that's really what I wanted to do with If Nobody Told You. And my next single, even more so, you'll hear that classical influence. Regardless, Kanye West as an artist, I'm a huge fan of Kanye West as an artist for a very similar reason. Like in his earlier albums, College Dropout and Late Registration especially, the way that he used classical music with the strings, and sometimes opera singers he uses a lot in his music, and also brought in gospel and the gospel sounds, and fused those sounds together to create just something so unique and beautiful. That's been a big inspiration for me, and I've really tried to do that in my music. Keep those strings, those traditional orchestral instruments, harps as well. I've used in the single that will be my next single. So yeah, I'm really passionate about keeping those sounds in my music.
Well, I think that's the cool thing about neo soul. When you think about the neo soul artists that have come up, Lauryn Hill, and you have the sound. It's not exactly there, but I can hear where that's coming from. But the whole Motown, like a lot of music today, because I like jazz and I like rock and a lot progressive music. When you listen to Motown, the skill sets of the drummers. I mean, the Motown drummers and the Funk Brothers, just the studio musicians on those songs. There's what you're talking about. There's string sections, there are horn sections. They're very, very tight arrangements, very poppy, but they're technically, unbelievably great work. That today sometimes you see some producers and you're like, they're not doing that level of work. And so I like the neo soul genre because it kind of brings, and even the soul, modern soul, that brings that stuff back, because that to me has always been a real Smokey Robinson to me, and Marvin Gaye and all those writers were like, oh my God. It's like every time I talk to somebody, it's like, listen to the drums on some of these Motown singles. And you're like, you really have to kind of step up your game.
Oh, massively, massively. I completely agree.
Yeah, because it's like, I love drum machines. I'm an electronic musician. I use my 808s and my 909s, but like a real drummer playing like a real classic like R&B or a funk groove, I'm a big purveyor of like funk. I'm like into that Parliament Funkadelic and any of those bands. Are like, oh my God, did they listen to Bootsy Collins and those guys, Bernie Worrell on the keys? That always like kind of tells me like, oh, I need to do better.
Oh yeah, yeah,
I go back and
exactly.
see what somebody else did. I was like, well, you know what? I think I need to go back to the factory, back in the lab, and think this out again.
Yeah, it makes you rethink your entire life.
Not that you can't do stuff. There's a lot of cool things you can do with samples and clips, but I do like the authentic nature of actually crafting a song.
Yeah, and I think one of the artists that still does that to this day that I'm aware of, I'm sure many do, but Bruno Mars, I remember him saying that his albums he only does an album like every 4 years because he's literally recording it the way they recorded Motown, as in like writing the bass part, getting the bassist in, and then the horn section, and writing those melodies and doing everything kind of very hands-on, and the drums, what are they going to sound like, what's the beat going to be like without a drum machine, with an actual drummer. So yeah, I think Bruno Mars definitely keeps that in his music.
Yeah, I like to hear, like Maxwell does a lot of really interesting stuff when he starts going toward that as well. He can do he gets a little more progressive, but yeah, there's some really cool stuff. And Raphael Sadiq, I think he does some amazing work.
Yes,
he's total purveyor of that, trying to keep that going. But it's so interesting to find like where you are in your music career, because I really enjoy that single. I like the string sessions, and I like the vocal. It's
Oh, thank
very,
you.
it's kind of like not where some of the songs are today, but it's where they should be.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate
Just because I'm kind
it.
of like, everybody's, oh, you're like, all you want to listen to is James Brown. And like, I'm sorry, but like, there's some stuff I do go to the past a lot. I do listen to
Mm,
newer material. I don't just listen to that. But to me, I'll listen to Coltrane or Davis or Sun Ra, and I'm like, you
mm.
need, and I like what you said, like Kanye West will bring in obscure soul songs. He'll bring in
Yes,
that kind of
yeah.
like fusion, bring in like jazz fusion,
Mm,
obscure soul songs that maybe no people didn't know, and I think that's the work of a really good producer and writer is to take
yeah.
all genres and turn it into something new. And in hip hop, we see some advanced hip hop producers are very good at cross genre. I think that's
Mm,
really cool when you can do that. Then when you
yeah.
have the clip based kind of writing, can become very creative, kind of like what Public Enemy used to do with the Bomb Squad. Very very innovative hip hop producers can take the genres forward.
Absolutely.
And the same thing with
Absolutely.
like what you're doing is mixing the kind of classical with the old school soul and Motown feel. That's pretty cool. That's a good place to be.
Thank you. I'll lean more
Oh,
into
I
it.
definitely, I appreciate it. I think there's a whole fan base that loves that. I mean, you can go anywhere, and I wouldn't like stop you from going more futuristic if you want to go and do like EDM or synth wave or trance. There are things you
Mm,
can do. It's kind of like you listen to a Prince record. One thing I always tell like musicians I'm with is like he would do multiple genres on one record. You didn't have to just do one. You know,
mm.
he
That's yeah. Okay, it's something I've been thinking about a lot because there is such a culture of you have to be in a specific genre, and I'm really questioning that because I think part of the creative outworking, like you just said, like Prince has done, is drawing from all the different bits and types of music and genres of music that you find interesting and you find compelling and putting that into your music. You really don't have to be bound by one
Yeah, I mean, I
genre.
think it's if you get the marketing people involved, and yeah, you want to get a hit. But if you think about Prince, I mean, he's probably the most advanced pop star to come out in that. If you look at that album, like Sign of the Times, Sign of the Times is his
Mm,
masterpiece. It's all over the place. I mean, there's rock, there's
mm.
funk, there's like new wave, there's all these different genres all over it, and it's way
Yeah,
beyond the
yeah.
time. I mean, it's a two record album when you're not supposed to do albums that big. And actually, in actuality, like the new version coming out, like the remastered version, is like his original concept for that album was to be like six albums. He had that much material,
Wow.
and it was all over the place. And the picture of what that archive is coming out kind of shows people like you don't have to be caged into a narrow lane. If you're creative,
Mm.
you think about what Stevie Wonder did on Songs of the Key of Life. I mean, that was a massive effort too, kind of like Sign of the Times of its time. That you
Yeah,
don't have to
yeah.
be pinned in. There are people that'll tell you that's what it has to be. But I mean, think about the Beatles. Sergeant Pepper, that would have never got created if you listen to people saying, "Well, what works?" Because there was nothing like it. So you
Mm.
always have to
Yeah,
push genres like Pink Floyd. Like, how would you ever get that today?
that's
You
so
would never
true.
get
Yeah,
anything like
that's
The
so true.
Wall because you got songs that are too long. What is
Yeah,
that? Or even the song from like the Eagles, Hotel California, goes beyond the time limit what people say you're supposed to go. It's
yeah,
over 7 minutes. So you always have to kind of take your creative lens and say, if I feel this and I believe in it, then I think I can do it. And then,
yeah.
also think about what's, you have to do as an artist. But if you have a creative exercise that you really want to try, you shouldn't let somebody stop you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, so you've got these two singles out now, but you're working toward more. Are you going to stay as a singles artist, or are you working toward a record?
Yeah, I was initially going to stay as a singles artist just because I was thinking in terms of Spotify and trying to put my business hat on, like we were talking about before, being kind of the 360 musician where I'm doing the business and I'm doing the marketing and the music and all of it. So I was going to, because thinking of the Spotify algorithm, I was kind of like, with each single, you make progress and you kind of get more favor with the Spotify algorithm and the key points that they're looking at. I think Spotify is a platform that does that is beneficial towards singles and kind of prefers singles. However, having spoken to people in the industry, they're kind of like, actually an EP is your kind of introduction of who you are as an artist. It's quite hard to get that from individual singles. And also in terms of taking things to the next level, it's a lot easier to get behind an artist who's put in an EP. An artist that's kind of just doing singles here and there, you don't know if they'll be here today, gone tomorrow. But if you're investing in an EP, that means you're serious. You're kind of putting your stake in the ground. And I thought that was really good justification. And I think creatively with an EP, you can do a lot more. I really enjoy the albums that kind of have a narrative running through them. And like Beyonce did with Lemonade and Kanye West did with his first albums, of those kind of filler tracks that are either poetry or some interlude of some sorts that when you listen to the whole thing together, it crafts a story, which you can't do with a single. With an EP, you can kind of do it way more so, not as much as you can with an album, but with an EP, it's that good middle ground where you can do that. So I definitely think that's why I want to do an EP.
Yeah, it's interesting because I kind of grew up, like I said, I'm in my 50s, and I grew up in the age of the album. I was a child of Sgt. Pepper and the Pink Floyds of the world, and you think about Tapestry and Carole King. There was Bob Dylan. There was the age where music was like a painting, music's like a novel. And I used to look at albums because I bought albums on vinyl. And the thing about vinyl back in the day was that it forced you to listen to the whole project. And so then when you listen to Sgt. Pepper's, it was like an event. It was like reading a novel. You listen to Pink Floyd, The Wall, all the way through, because that's the artist's statement, and it's like sound literature, and that's what you miss in the single market. And it seems like the world had shifted to kind of going back to the 50s, in this modern Spotify world. In the 50s, bands didn't really have record albums. I mean, they had them, but what happened was you have a bunch of singles, and then they collect them together and then put it into an album. That's what
interesting.
And we're kind of back to that, where a lot of people are on these playlists. They'll do all these singles, and maybe they'll end up putting all their hits into one record.
Exactly.
But what the Beatles really shifted that was that you can actually create a statement that's like a novel. There's like a sound painting. And Hendrix was a big proponent of the idea that music should be a sound painting. So he had these big projects like Electric Ladyland. It's a full experience. You have to listen to the whole way through, And the interesting thing about George Martin, he actually used to work with Peter Sellers on comedy records. And before he met the Beatles, he had been doing all these comedy records where it had all this overdubs and all these special effects and all this stuff. And the Beatles actually had listened to those Peter Sellers records. And so when they got George Martin as their producer, they said, could we incorporate some of that stuff you did on these comedy records? And that kind of was the emphasis for Sgt. Pepper. And the idea also was that George Martin said, I don't want to record the Beatles like they sound live, because that's just a Xerox of what they sound live. I want to interpret them like a painter, like a Monet interprets nature, right? So like the idea that a producer can take a band and make them sound otherworldly or sound different is kind of starts with George Martin and continues with Hendrix, continues with bands like Pink Floyd, is that you can actually make yourself more than what you could do live with the album format. And that's where the album format is very important into creating this like shaping of your sound.
Totally.
It's cool if you're going to go there, because I like what you're doing with these two singles, and I would love to hear like your full statement as an artist.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm looking forward to that because it will be not just the sound but also the messaging. Like, it's a chance to state your values as an artist, because I definitely have a mission and values as an artist, but that's hard to convey when you're just doing one single here, one single there, and there's not really a thread or a theme. But I'm saying one thing. I'm saying my music's for women. I want to kind of help women realize their greatness and tear down some untruths that are in society about us. But you can't really hear that from the two songs I've done, but you will definitely get that when I do my EP. So I'm looking forward to having that chance, because one, creatively I can, and musically I can say what I'm about, but also really convey the message. Why I go around talking about these things is because that's my mission, and you can actually hear that in my music now.
Yeah, that's kind of like the whole idea, like the movement in the '70s. We had the female singer songwriters. You had Tapestry. You had these, Joan Baez. You had all these great, Joni Mitchell. They were doing these great statements that were kind of empowering women, and they had these full albums that kind of had this different perspective. And it was, they were coming to the head in the '70s. That was like the kind of focal point of that. And now we have, people in the new age, bringing that back. But sometimes, like, the kind of Spotify playlist is not really geared toward that level of writing. And so it's
Yeah.
kind of more like the groove kind of oriented writing, or
Yeah.
kind of,
Yeah.
just trying to find that melody or that groove that's going to get people excited, but it's not going into the depth of what it could be. And so that's where I think it's cool that you have these other platforms like Instagram and SoundClouds of the world, and the YouTube, where people can be more experimental and like try things, and then maybe
Yeah.
get an audience base that they can build up with those ideas. I think that's
Yeah.
to be able to stay there. So in terms of coronavirus, and you've been able to get your music into, like, sync licensing, get it on TV. But in terms of performing, what is your plan? Are you able to come up with like a way to online perform, or be in online concerts, or be on?
Yeah, so it's been so different. Obviously, yeah, I haven't been doing kind of live performances. I've done quite a few online performances, so that's just through Instagram Live and those kind of things, because a lot of these venues that were previously doing live performances have moved over to Instagram Live and have invited me on to kind of do a live with them. So that's been really interesting and really fun. I think for me, my biggest focus, I think, is really building that solid fan base. I think what I've seen with a lot of musicians, rightly or wrongly, is that a lot of the time we kind of go around performing these kind of small gig nights. And what I've realized is that a lot of the time the room's just full of other musicians. So in terms of just advancement of like building that fan base and really establishing a career, we're kind of preaching to the choir a lot of the times in doing, I know in London anyway, of going to these kind of event nights, and everyone in the room's a musician themselves. So it's a fun night, but in terms of any traction to your music and advancing your career, it's probably not done very much. So I am focusing more so on really building that base online, and converting that to the physical, seeing those people in
Yeah,
real
because you can
life.
get over the pond and reach us over here, or reach people in Asia. Yeah, because that's what I've been doing. Is like, I'm in New Hampshire, and I'm an electronic musician. There's no scene for electronic music in New Hampshire. But my scene is like everywhere else. So I have
Yeah,
to go to
yeah.
Boston or New York when there wasn't the pandemic. I'd go to Manhattan and I'd play in clubs there, and it was preaching to the choir. I mean, you go to like a CBGB's and you got all the bloggers and all the producers and all the like people doing avant-garde stuff, looking for the next Velvet Underground. That's where you find, and that's cool because they get critics and people that'll send you where to other people, and maybe you get to produce on somebody's record, or you connect with another musician. But the online is where I really get most of my fans. It's like, because I get people from all over the world.
Oh, hello?
Yep, you hear me?
Hello?
Yeah. can't hear me?
Hello?
Did you drop off? Oh, hello? Talking about like online that I was able to really get more fans, and this is how this
Mm,
podcast actually came about is because of my overseas fans more than my local fans. Um,
mm,
that because
yeah.
I interview bands all over the world. I mean, I've had bands in Australia, Tokyo, Netherlands, New Zealand, everywhere. And then not if I just tried to find bands in the northeastern United States, I wouldn't be talking to you.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think a lot of, I don't know if any musicians are listening, will be listening to this, they will be. But it can be discouraging when you're in an area where the scene isn't really the kind of music you do. You can almost get discouraged in that people will, your friends who are also musicians will be hyping up someone else because they're within that kind of genre that's cool and that's popping and that's big in your area, and you might feel like, oh, my music's not good enough, but you just have to find your people. I've come to the realization that I think sometimes musicians can be a lot like comedians. There is this saying that comedians don't laugh at other comedians' jokes. And I think sometimes it can be like that with musicians in that they're looking for something different to what a fan is looking for. A musician will be looking for, one of your fellow musicians will be looking for something really technical on the guitar or something really technical vocally and certain kind of runs. And you might try so hard to impress that musician and what they deem to be good music that you're like not realizing that you have loads of fans out there, if you could just find them online, who love your music as it is and appreciate different parts of your music, appreciate the whole thing, rather than, oh, this was a really great lick on the guitar. Because the things that fans will be listening out for aren't the things that musicians will be listening out for. A lot of the time musicians notice a lot of stuff that fans don't notice in a song. So I really had to learn that. I thought my fellow musicians would be your biggest champions, but actually I realized that you find your tribe. You have to go out and find your tribe. And for me, it's been finding my tribe online. I found people who really love my music online. So it's kind of all about leaning into that.
Yeah, and the online community is how I think everybody's surviving in this coronavirus era.
Yeah.
That if you were a band that was like stuck to like in the LA scene, you got the Whiskey a Go Go, you have all these big clubs and a lot of the bands they kind of rotate. And I interview
Mm.
a lot of those bands, and they were having a lot of trouble with coronavirus because they weren't really radiating outside that area. Now that's a really
Okay.
deep area, and there's a lot of clubs, and you can make a living doing those
Mm.
clubs, and those bands work. But when this happened, that kind of evaporated, and then they had to
Yeah.
find a way to get beyond that area.
Yeah.
And so
I,
that's kind of the trap you can get into.
Yeah, I completely agree. My something that actually is just one of my goals in life. Both me and my husband, we're trying to think. We've since we got married, we've actually been trying to work towards being kind of less dependent on external forces. So for us, that's being able to have something that pays us, that we can do from anywhere in the world, that you don't have to be in a certain place to do it. You can be indoors, you can be wherever. And I think musicians now are really realizing the importance of that, of being diversified, essentially, not just having physical gigging as your only stream of revenue. Because if that dries up, or if there's a pandemic, then you are really screwed. You have to have diverse streams of interest from your fans, of engagement, and ways that you can make money that don't rely on you showing up to a club and playing.
That's been the problem with a lot of traditional like rock oriented bands or performance bands, because
Mm,
the only way they were surviving is like they're not making enough off the streaming. The
mm,
streaming wasn't bringing in enough money, and they're selling the merch at the show, they're selling the
yeah.
T-shirts at the show, and they're going on their tour bus and their tour in California, and they're hitting
Mm,
like every club in California, and they were able to do that. But now, since they didn't, they had an outreach and maybe they had a web store. Now they're having to like, I got to really concentrate on the web store. I got to sell this vinyl. I got
yeah.
to spend time signing the vinyl, putting posters into the vinyl, and,
Yeah.
and pushing the merch. more than the physical show, which
Yeah.
luckily they had that leg, and they've been kind of pushing on that leg real heavy
Amazing.
to survive. But it's interesting. They kind of showed the weakness in the model of how we get paid for our music
Yes. Yeah.
is somewhat of a controversy in terms of you can do well, if you sync license, you can do well if you can get it, to a certain level, like millions of streams, but not everybody's going to hit that million stream level. So it's like, how do you get paid fairly for the work you do if you're on a small tier? Like if you're a band that's only going to hit 200,000,
Yeah.
how are you going to get a livable income from that?
Yeah.
So that's where, like, okay, well, maybe we sell vinyl, or we
Yeah.
sell handmade CDs, we do concepts that we do fan interaction at a higher level, doing custom, marketing, like micro marketing of stuff that people. I've seen bands like, oh, I'm gonna send you like this custom thing if you join my Patreon. Then I'm going to give you this custom signed low volume thing, and it's going to run out, and then you've got like a block of like 1,000 things or something.
Yeah.
That's why I see a
Yeah.
lot of bands doing stuff like that
Yeah.
to survive.
Yeah. I think that's really creative, and that's really what's needed.
But so going forward, I know you've worked with producers. Have you thought of collaborating with artists within your genre or outside your genre?
I have, and I'm in the process of doing that. I think that's something I've been really, really keen on. So it's probably the collaboration is one from the standpoint of being kind of creatively interested in collaborating with artists outside of my genre to learn more and kind of improve as be a more well-rounded musician as a result, but also for TV licensing as well. So there's a rapper who does grime music. Grime music is kind of, really big in the UK. And it's very popular for being licensed to football and sporting television.
Cool.
Yeah. But the difficulty in the UK that they have is that a lot of the rappers that do grime are like kids. They're like 14 and they don't know anything about getting your music properly registered, having all of those kind of the copyright and licensing permissions and that information that you need, having that all in place so it can be played on TV. Otherwise, it just can't be played. So there's so much amazing grime music, but they just a lot of these shows just can't play them on TV because it's not registered correctly, and they haven't gone through all the.
They might have the samples not registered, or they didn't. Yeah,
exactly. So I would love to collaborate with him and kind of help fill that void of like one getting an amazing track and being able to kind of dip into a genre I haven't done before, but also getting the song registered and being able to kind of pitch that to sporting television shows. And then there's also another rapper that I'm currently working with, writing a song with. He was in a kind of really famous band over here in the UK. So that's quite a great opportunity just to learn from him. He has so much experience in the industry that I'm really excited to see where that goes. And then I think outside of that is, sometimes I write a lot of songs and I'll have someone in mind. So there's a song that I've written recently that I would love for a certain kind of UK indie singer to, be on that track with me, and I'll see what they say. They're kind of
like a duet.
Yeah, so like a duet. So they're kind of up and coming, and I just think their voice would be perfect for it. And actually, I've just collaborated with a DJ, a dance music DJ here in the UK called DJ Bedalia. He played at Tomorrowland. He's doing amazing things. And he recently did a remix of a song that I've done the vocals on. So that was a bit out of my comfort zone because I haven't really done EDM or dance music before. But it was really cool in getting to be creative because he wanted to not just remix the song, but actually, come up with some new melodies, come up with some new lyrics and really make it unique and different, like a standalone piece from the song he was remixing. So that's been really fun. That's in the works. So yeah, I'm really keen on collaborating with other artists, both in my genre and outside of my genre.
Well, that's really, I think it's been great, talking with you. I think you really have a solid vision as an artist where you want to go and what you're doing, and that's really cool to
Thank you.
see you in this place. Most of the musicians we interview are actually female artists, and we feel in the last 2 years, like female artists around the world have actually been doing some really vital work. And
That's amazing.
as a podcaster, we're like, okay, well, we're kind of giving female artists that focus, because I grew up listening to a lot of male artists, and I'm a male artist myself, but I've always gravitated toward female musicians in terms of like artists that I thought were very vital, from like a Liz Phair to Tori Amos to listening to Erykah Badu and neo soul artists. I just felt that there was a lot of interesting stuff going on that was more creative or more vital than what I saw some of the male artists doing.
Oh, interesting.
So it's been interesting. It's kind of probably got more female interviews than male band interviews, just because they haven't really perked my interest, with what they're doing.
Okay.
But we'll see if we can get. I'm willing to interview anybody, but I think the female artists are really on the up and coming. I agree with what you're in your bio, where you're talking about trying to push that type of perspective.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I really hope to do more and more of that. And this has been incredible, just having this conversation with you, because very rarely do artists actually get a chance to go into the music and the technical stuff and the strategy and all of that stuff that goes into their music. So what you've created is absolutely incredible. Because a lot of the kind of forward-facing interviews are about kind of your general journey, roughly high level about the music. So having the opportunity to kind of bounce ideas off you and go into kind of the nitty-gritty, the depth of it, is awesome.
Yeah, I felt like what I saw going on in the podcast community wasn't what I wanted. I kind of like a behind the music type of thing. I like to watch music documentaries, so I like to go kind of deeper than just like your single and maybe a 15-minute conversation about what's gonna be on like Entertainment or something. It's more like I want to go in depth, like what's your raison d'etre? Like, why are you doing this? And I feel like that's what people want to hear. If they love the musician they're into. So I hope the fans that I interviewed, the fan base of each artist I interview, I'm trying to give them what I would want as a fan.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's amazing. You're doing incredible work.
Well, thank you very much, Kima. And we're going to push this out. We're on 11 podcast platforms, including Spotify and Apple.
Amazing.
And
I'll send everyone there.
Yeah, cool. This is cool. We've got a pretty good integration between Anchor FM and Instagram, where Spotify, our primary company that runs us, we were able to actually integrate the highlight that will go directly to the Spotify version of the podcast. Even though we're on 11 platforms, if you're on Instagram and you click the highlight, you can go right to the Spotify version of the podcast, which we will put up on our Instagrams, and then you can share as a story on yours.
Oh, awesome. That's great. I will do that.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And when you have another project, we tend to have people that we interview come on 2 or 3 times based on their output of their projects. So when you have another project you want to promote or an event you want to promote and you want to talk to the fans again, let us know and we'll set it up.
That sounds great. I would love to. Thanks so much for having me, Phantom.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.